And good evening, listeners. And good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap, a broadcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project, where, like the drinks, the current events are on the house. And I'm your host, Alex Kirsch, pragmatic progressive, U.S. Army veteran, truck driver, gamer, and streamer. If this is your first time on the show, please do not forget to hit like, share, and comment. We are currently streaming live on YouTube and Twitch and the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. The format for this show is simple. I bring one or more guests onto the show. We talk beer or beverage of choice and current events of the week. Each person will discuss their beverage of choice for this hour, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, it does not matter. Then each person will cover two current events of their choosing. They give the current event, they give their assessment, then each person gets a chance to give their assessment, and then we both discuss. Debate may be possible, rest assured you are in a good faith zone, and you will get your chance to get your point across. The point of this space is for all of us to discuss the issues, what we think of it, and keep an open mind to what the other person has to say. Please keep it within TOS. Strong language can and will be used throughout this podcast, so listener discretion is advised. Without further ado, let's welcome our guest this evening, Kay Fellowz. How you doing, Kay?
I'm good. How are you?
I am still coming down with a cold, but you know what? I'm rolling with it. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and what your politics is and like what your where we can find you.
I'm Kay Fellowz. I'm a human rights activist focusing on all manner of subjects. I consider myself to be pretty progressive, far left-leaning, but really that depends on who you talk to, because depending on what political or social subject we're talking about, people will put me anywhere between far left and far right.
Now, why would people put you in a far right, usually?
Because I am anti-abortion.
Yep. I've seen some of your videos and I've seen some of your debates about it. But the thing I found that's most interesting, because with some of the pro-life, and I know you also did a video about your critique of the pro-life movement, but there are people in the pro-life movement, this is not going to be a pro-life debate or whatnot, but it's just, you've talked about how the pro-life people are there, but they don't want to do any follow-through, when the mother gives birth to the child, they don't want to support any things, but you're very big about fund these things, this is what will help women, after birth and such. You've said those things, right?
Yeah, my position really at this point is just that not only does the pro-life movement not stand for all the things that it claims to stand for and do all the things that it claims to do, but the effort that they put forth is actively harming the cause that they claim to be representing. If they would put forth as much effort into social safety nets, things like paid family leave, getting support to women when they're experiencing crisis pregnancies, you would see the abortion rate drop astronomically. Whereas legal bans and going through the legal system, studies by pro-life organizations even point out that these bans only bring down the abortion rate in that area anywhere between 14 and 20%. Whereas whenever you talk to women who have had abortions and you go off of the numbers that pro-life organizations themselves have collected, then you could say that upwards of 70% of abortions wouldn't even happen if they were supporting women throughout their pregnancy and beyond.
That's completely fair. That's a good position to have, honestly. So, but anyway, I just kind of want to get a little bit of a clarification on there because some people are like, well, wait a second, how can you be left-leaning and be pro-life? I mean, It's context is very important, and I just wanted you to kind of get that out there. So, but before we go into our current events, I'm going to talk about my beer of choice this evening. It being St. Patty's Day tomorrow, I got myself a little Guinness. And I'm drinking this out of a really cool mug that I got at the Renaissance Festival, not this year, but last year. It was a nice little shelter, and the guy that made it is also an Army vet. And I was like, this thing is so cool. It's made from real tree and everything. I love it. It's such a cool thing to drink out of. But Kay, do you have anything to drink tonight, or just stick with water, or just relaxing?
I'm a really big. People make fun of me of water that I drink and how I drink my water. I drink a ton of water, and I put a whole lemon. I squeeze the entire lemon into 1 cup of water, and then I also put salt rocks in my water. Because it's really good for your hair, it's really good for your skin.
Really?
And so people make fun of me because my water is it's salty and really, really lemony. But I drink an average of 10 really big tumblers of water every single day.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
But anytime I'm not drinking water, I'm probably drinking sweet tea.
Okay. Yeah. Now, so I'm kind of curious about this whole salt rocks thing. Does it also replenish electrolytes, or is it just what does it do?
Yeah, there's actually a ton of benefits to putting salt rocks in your water. I specifically get the pink Himalayan salt rocks. And after a while, they do break down in your water. They do make your water really salty, so you have to drink it relatively quickly. But yeah, it's great for your skin. It's great for your hair. It's good for nail growth. It's good for eyelash growth. I highly recommend it to all the women out there that are listening. It is just like such a simple solution that you can add to your everyday routine that really, really helps benefit overall your energy, because it does help replenish electrolytes. It has a lot of minerals in it that are really, really good for you. You're seeing a lot of people use like these water filters that put minerals back into your water after they strip all the bad stuff out. Well, one of those minerals you can find in pink Himalayan salt rocks.
Interesting. Because the thing is, like, I stopped drinking Gatorade, right? And the reason why is because like it's so sugary, but also because like after a while it kind of loses its flavor. But I drink a lot of Pedialyte, right? Because when I was stationed down at Fort Benning, I would see the Rangers drink Pedialyte. And the reason why that is because it has everything that the body needs, like the zinc, the electrolytes, and it replenishes the body. And it actually feel like I get myself like a boost, like I feel replenished and I'm ready to just like, not really take on the world, but I feel like better. I can continue with my activities and whatnot because like what I do now is like I move windows, I move shingles, I move siding and stuff like that. And that's that's a serious workout there. But so I usually take a Pedialyte with me. But my wife also got what's it called? Like liquid IV. It's like little packet substances. So I use that as well. So, but yeah,
that's kind of how I feel with my lemon water. Like I take it with me everywhere because it just like helps you get through the chaotic parts of the day.
Absolutely. But people say, "Oh, drink water." There's a reason why 70% of our body is water. We need it. It's really important. So, yeah.
Yeah, drink more water, people.
Absolutely, drink more water, especially before you start drinking, because the more water you drink, the less chance of a hangover you'll get. Just saying. I know, I've experienced this, so. Shall we go ahead and just jump right into current events?
Let's do it.
All right. So, topic number 1. Now, the reason I'm doing this topic is thanks to a friend of mine, a friend of the show, Michael Hilliard of the Red Line Podcast. He covered this topic on Sunday. I haven't had a chance to do it. His YouTube, you can find his YouTube channel, the Red Line Podcast. Every 2 weeks they put out a new episode. And I'm leaving a link in the description of the show for that episode specifically. The insight in it is like he brings on 3 or 4 geopolitical experts on that region, which I think is so important. He doesn't bring on people that are like, Jim Bob that read a blog. No, he brings on people that actually specialize in these regions. And it really opened up my eyes. The insight that he provided and the insight from his guests, and I even talked to him like some follow-up questions and stuff that really helped me plan for this episode, essentially. But we in the United States are observing the situation in Haiti right now. Major news outlets are reporting was essentially a box of TNT that is already lit and coming very, very close to become volatile. Now, many people believe that this situation right now kicked off when President Jovenel Moise, I think I probably butchered that, but I'm not very good with French. He was the 43rd president of Haiti, and he was assassinated by 28 mercenaries that were originally from Colombia, and apparently the contract came out of the state of Florida, and this happened in 2021. They're the ones who have allegedly killed him. Since then, Ariel Henry, a neurosurgeon and politician who served as the acting prime minister of Haiti, has been the acting president. Henry has recently stated that he will step down out of power, and then there's going to be like an interim government, essentially. However, there are 3 other people right now that are vying for power in Haiti. The first one is Jeremy Barbecue Charizier. He was a former Haitian police officer who has an apparent fancy for just setting people on fire and setting buildings on fire, which is apparently how he got his big break in 2018. That's where he got the nickname from. Now, there's some speculation, people saying, no, it's because he likes a chicken shop. Well, his mom owned a chicken shop, he owned a chicken shop, but when I spoke to my friend Michael, he said, well, there's no proof to that whatsoever, and he only got the nickname in 2018 once he set 40 houses on fire or something like that. He went on just on a tear. As of right now, he's the leader of the gang known as the G9, which was founded in 2020. Recent attacks by G9 have led to significant food and water shortages. Fuel is not being delivered to generators to keep power in the houses, businesses, government buildings, and hospitals. There's such a big vice grip going on that all the necessary needs to keep Haiti functional as possible, the current government asking them to please deliver fuel to them so they can keep their buildings open. Person number 2 is Guy Philippe, a man who helped lead a coup against the former president Bertrand Aristide in 2004. He ran for office in 2016 in the Haitian Senate, and he won his office. But before he could get immunity from prison, the U.S. government arrested him on drug trafficking charges, and he was extradited back to the U.S. Last November, however, he was released from prison and was repatriated back to Haiti. Now he wishes to be the next president of Haiti. The third player in this game is a gang leader who's getting more fame by utilizing social media platforms like YouTube that goes by the name of Izzo. His real name is Johnson Andre. His origin, however, is while Barbecue started as a policeman, the 26-year-old Izzo has climbed the gang hierarchy and leads the gang known as the, I'm really going to butcher this one, Village de Die 5 Segon gang. I really butchered that one, I'm sure. His gang at this time has assumed control of all maritime routes in Port-au-Prince Bay. Like most other gangs in Haiti, this one engages in credible enterprises like kidnappings, drug and arms trafficking, and are known to participate in rape, according to the United Nations. 80% of Port-au-Prince is controlled by these gangs and is making life miserable for all the citizens across the country. Nations like Canada and Brazil, who have helped in the past, are no longer interested in providing aid. Countries like Uruguay had rape cases, Pakistan had rape cases in Haiti, Sri Lankan soldiers had 108 cases of sexual abuse and sexual assault, Nepalese soldiers were caught hanging Haitian police officers and that they had insisted that these guys had committed crimes. Now, according to my friend Michael here, the countries that managed to behave themselves, one of them was actually Rwanda. Now, Rwandans right now are unable to provide any assistance due to the operations that are happening across North Africa. Ethiopians, however, that also have experience in this, are engaged in their own civil war conflict right now. Kenya, however, is the lead contender to basically come over under U.S. assistance to come over and provide aid and to help assist Haiti, essentially. They have the best reputation for peace of all the African nations at this point due to their history, and they also have a history of dealing with terrorists like Al-Shabaab in their country. The U.S. is offering to fund this operation by funding them with $300 million from U.S. taxpayers, essentially. They will provide training and help Kenya in their fight against Al-Shabaab. Now, depending on the person in charge, this may not even come to fruition. Barbecue has already insisted that he's not bringing any outside assistance to do this whatsoever. Like, if he takes control, no Kenyans are coming in, no outside assistance is going to come in. Now, the question is, does the U.S. pull the trigger and send Kenya in, or does the U.S. wait and see and takes control and attempts to negotiate with the victor? Now, normally I kind of give my assessment, but I'd like to hear your assessment on this, okay? What's your thoughts?
I think that, I am in no way educated enough to give much of an opinion on foreign conflicts. I am not an expert on foreign affairs in any way, but after watching the news cycle of the last 5 months and the international conversation that has been happening, I think that it's deeply, deeply important that whenever we're talking about foreign countries coming into any area to assist any people, that we're listening to the people on the ground and what they're saying about what it is that they want and what it is that they need, and where the focus needs to be as far as aid goes and getting that aid in to the people that need it. I'm not educated enough on what is going on the ground in Haiti, but for me, whenever it comes to, especially with our own government, the United States government, and how they go about distributing aid and why they choose to distribute aid to who, we have to take the things that they say with a grain of salt, and we need to, as the American people who are funding whatever it is that the United States government is doing, need to be very, very hyper-vigilant and hyper-aware of what Haitians are saying on the ground about what they want from the United States and our assistance.
I'm inclined to agree. I'm really kind of like, it's so hard to say because we've seen what happens, like when we negotiate with certain groups. We saw what happened with Afghanistan. We negotiated with the Taliban before, without the Afghan government there, and then they took control, and we saw what happened. That was, I'm not going to lie, I might be progressive, but I'm definitely going to say that was a complete disaster. I'm not going to lie about that. I mean, when I look at that situation, and then I look at what's going on in Haiti, I just wonder, will somebody like Barbecue actually take over? And then are we going to be forced to negotiate with this guy? And is he just going to go on an absolute tear? And is he going to cause more harm? Because it's blatantly obvious that his gang is like the leading contender right now. But is he going to like rally all the other gangs together and get them to all cooperate? Or is it just going to be like, a whole new nightmare? Because for those not aware, Haiti has a really, really lengthy history of like corruption, presidential leaders being assassinated or being thrown out of power. People like in the episode that they covered, they even talked about like how their own crops, like rice, they used to be a huge importer of rice. Now they're importing rice from the United States, but that is just like so, filled like I can't remember what it was, but like it's basically like, like not arsenic, but it's something like basically like that's in the rice essentially. I wish I wrote that down, but like they're importing this, and it's just like it's not good for them essentially. And there's a lot of things that are just going just completely awry, and I just wonder, the acting president has already stepped down. There's 3 contenders stepping in. Are any of these guys like competent leaders, or are they just destined? Are they just doomed forever? That's what I'm just curious about. I mean, I don't have answers on this either. And I'm not much of an expert on this, but I find it fascinating, like how not enough people are talking about this and wondering why aren't we doing more about this. But I think it's just because people say, well, the U.S. doesn't have a great track record, and they're not wrong, honestly. I mean, I love my country, but we got to be critical about it, especially when it's appropriate.
For sure. And the reality is that, it's the same conversation that's happening all over the world. What are we going to do about Haiti? What are we going to do about what's going on in the Congo? What are we going to do about Sudan? What are we doing about Palestine? And it's like there are all of these corruption issues happening all over the world, all over the globe. And it's like, what do we do about this? How do we fix this? Because the reality is that whenever you look at the key players of people that could go in and potentially help, the overall international community can't rely on those governments to not go in and either mess it up and make the situation worse, or go in under the guise of helping just to push ideas of colonialism and imperialism.
Yeah, it's really kind of hard because, having spent time in both Iraq and Afghanistan, now I spent more time on the ground, like in patrol in Iraq, and it's just, the thing that I found out is that people that don't want democracy, you can't force it upon them. Like, they would actually have to want this. That's why, like, places like Kuwait, it was easier. They were sold on democracy a lot faster than they were in Iraq. Now, things are better in Iraq. I'm not saying, like, what us invading Iraq, like, solved the problems, but I'm just saying it took years for Iraq to kind of, like, right itself. It's still a dangerous country to go to, but people are able to fly in and out of Iraq and in and out of Baghdad. Things are coming together slowly but surely, but it's such a tricky situation, honestly. And honestly, Haiti is, like, not shaping up to be any better at this time. So, like, in a situation like this, if a guy like by the name of Barbecue was to take office, should we negotiate with him, or should we just like let somebody else try to negotiate him? I mean, what do you think?
I think that I would have to revert back to my original position that if someone like Barbecue, which if he takes over, they're gonna have to revamp that name. But if he was the person to take power, then I think that we would, at that point especially, it would be really, really important to listen to Haitian civilians, to be like, what is it that we can do to rectify this situation? Is this a situation that we can help rectify? And I think that Americans really, really need to be critical of themselves whenever having these conversations, and realize that there are countries all over the world that, even if with the best intentions, the U.S. comes to the table and says, hey, we want to help, there's going to be a lot of countries that are going to be like, we do not want your help. And there is valid reasoning behind that. And we have to take accountability for the valid reason why they do not want us in their country.
Yeah. I think it's just, some people think, oh, well, we're the United States. We can do anything. We can do anything right. I was like, I'm sorry. When people say, oh, U.S. soldiers have never done wrong, that's not true. Not true whatsoever. We've had U.S. soldiers that have committed war crimes. It's horrible. I don't like saying it. It's a bitter pill, but, the first step in fixing a problem is recognizing that there is one. And if we're going to hold other countries accountable, we have to hold ourselves accountable as well. But it's just some people are too afraid to do that, or they don't want to make it look like, oh, well, if we hold ourselves accountable, then no one's going to trust us. I disagree. I think if you hold yourself more accountable and you punish those that actually go against the rule of law. Now, war is a really complicated thing, but if you hold yourselves accountable, because, again, I go to this. You can't be mad if one country does something terrible, but then you do it yourself. I find that, like, and I know we're probably going to go over this in one of our next topics, but it's just, and that though goes with our allies too. I mean, I don't expect us to like charge in like white knights, but in a situation like this, with certain people are going to be taking power, like certain gang leaders and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if it's like going to be like a situation where like this is just like a giant fire. You give it more oxygen and it burns itself out, and then restarts again. I don't know if that's what we got to do. I mean, when I asked Michael about this, like, you know, he didn't give me an answer because he's a very busy guy, but it's frightening to think about. And now they got people saying, oh, we got Haitians coming in. They're saying Haitian cannibals are coming across our borders. I think that's just fear mongering. I don't know if there's cannibals coming across, but there are people that are coming from Haiti because they don't want to be in that situation anymore. And honestly, I don't blame them.
And I think that it's really, really sad to see the state of discourse whenever it comes to situations like this. Like, we would like to think that as Americans, we have come so far and we have progressed so far in our opinions about other people from other countries, people that don't look like us, that people don't believe like us, they don't live like us. The reality is that America is still a very, very bigoted country. We're very, very narrow-minded whenever it comes to other people, and we would rather think the worst of people coming across our borders than open up our minds to understanding other cultures.
Yeah. I love my country, but we are idiots. I have no problem saying that. Like, there's a lot of morons in this country. I have no problem saying that. People are like, well, how can you say this about your country? It's like, because I live here. I see it all the time.
We're undereducated and we're overly indoctrinated, and it's just the reality of it. And you can't even begin to fix the undereducation and the over-indoctrination until you acknowledge that it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, anyway, would you like to go ahead and start with your first topic?
Sure. I would love to have a conversation with you. I would love to get more insight from you about your opinions on what's going on over in Israel, Palestine, with the current, for lack of a better term, conflict. Won't come right out of the gate, you know, with the G word. But what's going on, how negotiations are beginning to break down, how seemingly conversations between our president and Israel's current sitting prime minister are on a little bit of shaky ground. And with this new announcement from Benjamin Netanyahu that he fully intends to invade Rafah, whether or not Joe Biden gives him the green light or not.
I am not a fan of Netanyahu. You've heard me say this. I think he's a warmonger, honestly. I had this discussion a while back with somebody that came on the show as well. I don't think he's necessarily a guy that's looking out for the best interests of his people. I'm not going to speculate as to whether I'm not going to say that he allowed October the 7th to happen because, you know, who would? But I just feel like this gave him all the excuse he needs to just go in and just start wrecking shop. And, you know, when people say, well, you know, this is war. I've always asked this question. How is it whenever a terrorist attack happens, right? We call it a terrorist attack. But whenever we retaliate, right? Their retaliation has resulted in the death of 13,000 children and a total 35, 40,000 people total. And people well, that's just collateral damage. I feel like certain people we just seem to care less about because of their culture, their religion, you know. And I find that really, it's bullshit, honestly. I don't like to use the term, you know, collateral damage, really. It's because I see you share those photos, and it's heartbreaking to see. And I've seen, the dead children. It's horrifying to look at. And it's just just collateral damage. It's not the big, no, these people were not involved with what happened on October the 7th. And I do agree that they need to be more precise in their attacks. If you're going after just Hamas targets, yeah, okay, war's going to happen. There will be some casualties. It's a horrible thing to say, but that's just the fact of the matter. But my problem is that it just seems very indiscriminate. It just seems like everybody is a target, essentially. And when you've got people, when you're trying to corral 2 million people in a really small area, and then, well, hey, we're still going to move to this side of Gaza, and you'll be safe. And then they move to that side, and bombs are still dropping in that area. It's they have nowhere to go. And when people are well, they could just leave to Egypt. Egypt doesn't want them. People, these Palestinian people are victims. And whenever I hear people say, oh, well, you know, they elected Hamas, that doesn't matter, okay? That's the only government they have at this point. Hamas is not letting anybody else run for office. If they are, they're just getting surrounded, or they're shutting everybody else, shutting the competition out, just like Putin does, just like Benjamin Netanyahu does. I mean, he's a corrupt son of a bitch. I don't care what anybody says. But my problem is that, just because that is their government Does that mean that, well, this is our government? Should somebody attack us then because they don't like our government? Of course not. I hate it when people do stuff like this, and I have no qualms when it comes down to taking on a combatant. An enemy combatant is a certified target. Got to take them out. That's just the law of war. But indiscriminate bombing of hospitals, schools, they're not supposed to be targeted unless they are being used as military targets. And as of right now, a lot of these targets that have been bombed, I haven't been able to confirm whether they all have been used as targets. That's just my point of view.
Well, see, my thing about the whole, legitimate military target is, first of all, Gaza is not a country, and Israel and Hamas is not an official government, because Gaza is not a country. It is their acting government and their acting military, but they don't have an official military. They do not have official military bases. Everything in Gaza is a legitimate military target because Hamas does not operate out of legitimate military bases the way that Israel does. They are stuck in an open-air prison, essentially, where everything could potentially be used as a base because they're not allowed to have military outposts in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. So the whole argument, I can't even have a legitimate conversation with people regarding the legitimate military targets and targeting Hamas because I feel like Israel supporters refuse to acknowledge the extreme differentiation in the two sides here. You have an established state that is backed by the most, the biggest, most largest militaries in the world supporting them against a 2.2 million people civilian population that has nothing. They have nothing. And then to go so far as to use the fact that majority of people in Gaza are backing the resistance as an excuse to continue bombing civilians is insane. These are people who have lived their entire lives under occupation, under oppression, being terrorized, being brutalized, having their children, their parents, their grandparents, their siblings, their friends, their loved ones kidnapped, tortured, murdered in the street with absolutely no consequence to what is happening to them. Whenever I have a conversation, I was on the Tomfoolery show the other day having a conversation with Quibbles over coffee regarding this, and whenever we have conversations about this, it inevitably breaks down to us screaming at each other because people want to have a conversation about the logistics of it. Well, Israel's there and they're not going anywhere, so what are we going to do about it? And I'm not a political commentator. I am not an expert on foreign affairs. I'm a human rights activist. I don't give a shit what the logistics are. I care about the 2.2 million people that are being bombed, that are being sniped in the street, that are starving, whose children are dying of dehydration. We have literally watched children day to day die of starvation and dehydration. I don't give a shit what the logistics are. I don't care about legitimate military targets. I do not care. I want to have a conversation about the civilians that you are creating deep-rooted hatred that is going to take generations to undo. So what is the point even having conversations about peace? Because these people are going to hate Israelis, and you can't even say that they don't have a legitimate reason not to.
No, you're 100% right, because this is something I usually bring up, right? If people think, and I try to have conversations with people about this too, and sometimes they just plug their ears and they say, if I'm critical of Israel, I'm obvious an anti-Semite. It's like, no, I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm sorry, that's not how it goes. You got Jews and Orthodox Jews, Hasidic Jews that are completely against what's going on. They stand with Palestine. Are they anti-Semitic too? But my biggest thing is that what people don't understand is when you kill one terrorist or somebody that's not even involved, you create 5 more basically, because why should they I ask people, do you just think that Palestine is just okay, listen, we give up, okay, we'll come on over and help us, hey, we'll tell you where all Hamas is. First of all, Israel is not going to guarantee their safety, so you can't really rely upon that. The next bit is the reason why this is such a problem is because the second that, say, for example, you've got a 5-year-old child that just watched his entire family just get wiped out. You think he's going to want to work with Israel? Do you think he wants to, he's not going to see anything. He just is going to remember that these people are responsible for the death of his family. You basically created another, person. Now he has his own vendetta against Israel. And who is he going to turn to? He's going to turn to Hamas. Why? Because Hamas is fighting Israel. I mean, even if he didn't support Hamas before, he might now. I mean, that's just like, that's the vicious cycle, essentially.
And we can see it. Like, if you look at history, you can see it. I was trying to explain this to Tom and Quibbles the other day. Like, the average age of Hamas combatants on the ground in Gaza are 18 to 21 years old. Okay, so go back 18 to 21 years, and you have the 2008 military operation of the Gaza Strip, Operation Cast Lead, which was catastrophic. It was so brutal that multiple countries that are members of the United Nations tried to investigate Israel for potential war crimes that happened during that operation. Even Belgium went so far as to try to detain at the time, the current sitting Minister of Foreign Affairs, whenever she was scheduled to do a speaking event in Brussels in 2009. They said that as soon as she got off the train, she was going to be detained, and she refused to go because she knew that she was going to be investigated and brought up on conspiracy charges about war crimes that absolutely did take place during Operation Cast Lead. Like, these are children that lost loved ones, they lost family members, they lost their parents, they lost their siblings. Yeah, they're going to be angry. And whenever you have a militant group that is actively resisting what they see as their oppressor, their occupier, of course a child that is angry and hurting and bitter is going to take up the opportunity to fight for the people that he lost.
Yeah. And like that's the unfortunate truth. That's something that people are not willing to accept, honestly. And I remember, like, did you see, like, when Mehdi Hassan went on Piers Morgan's show? I thought he did a great job. He completely slapped that guy around. I mean, like, that's why I like Mehdi Hassan, because he's very consistent. He denounced the attacks on October the 7th. And when Piers Morgan asked him, do you denounce Hamas? He's like, why is it you're always asking your Palestinian guests, what do you denounce Hamas? But you never ask your Israeli guests when you come on, do they denounce the attacks that Israel has done? And he never answered it. Piers Morgan, he tried to, like, tuck tail and run, say, listen, I have Palestinian guests on all the time. He said that on Twitter. It's like, that's not the point he was trying to make. He was asking, why don't you ask your counterparts that are Israeli if they denounce the attacks? It's such wormy behavior, but Mehdi Hassan is 100% correct. Why is it that they are expected to denounce Hamas, which they do, but nobody's expected to denounce Israel, essentially? I mean, and again, I'm not anti-Israel, I'm just against their government and the things that they're doing. But I know there's Israeli people that don't want this war to go on. There's Palestinian people that definitely don't want this war to go on. But here we are.
Yeah, and the reality is that the war crimes that are being committed by the IDF, they are documenting them themselves. They are uploading them to social media themselves. They're not trying to hide it. And neither is the leadership in Israel. They will openly state that their military is doing these things. So it's actually really ridiculous for people like Piers Morgan and other people in the mainstream media to refuse to ask that question, because those war crimes are right there for everybody to see. And you know that people like Piers Morgan, who are as active on, like, Twitter and so on and so forth, have seen these videos because they go absolutely viral anytime that they're posted. He's definitely seen all of the pictures of IOF soldiers posing with underwear that they've raided from Gazan women's underwear drawers and posing with wearing them and laughing at them and all of the horrible things that they've written on walls of children's schools. Like, this is right out there in the open. It would be such an easy question for him to ask somebody, like, do you denounce the fact that the military that you are supporting is acting this way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if people are afraid to denounce what Israel is doing, then I call it cowardly behavior. You should not. This is why I said earlier, if we would hold our soldiers to that same standard, why can't we hold Israel to that standard? What exactly are we worried about? Now, I'm not going to go into this whole JQ bit. I think that's preposterous. You know what I'm talking about. But my beef, though, and I talked with another guy about this when it comes down to, because we talked about the airman that set himself on fire, and I said,
Aaron Buckstone.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't believe I already forgot his name. A lot on my mind, but I pretty much said that the only thing I feel this is going to do is it's just going to bring mockery to his name, essentially, and it started like right away. People were making memes, making jokes about it, stuff like that. That's all that was really going to come from it. And I understand there are people out there that support what he did, but I just feel like here in America, people are just going to make fun of him and just mock him for that and say he died, he's an anti-Semite, stuff like that. And I was like, he's not anti-Semite. I just feel like nothing's going to come from this. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm simply saying it's like, because that's just how indifferent we really are to this. I mean, we're just so, because like, what's it called? I brought up the example of a Buddhist monk who set himself on fire to protest the government in Vietnam. It didn't change anything. But we look at that as a guy that, you know, put his convictions on the line and set himself on fire. Nobody made fun of that. But we're making fun of a guy that actually set himself on fire. I mean, you know, people can have their opinions about that guy, but I just feel like I understand why he did it. I feel like there's a way he could have gone about it better. I don't think people should set themselves on fire. Honestly, that's just my personal opinion, but it's just like I understand why he did it. You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, I kind of go back to what I said earlier. We like to think that we have come so far as a country, but like you said, back in Vietnam, nobody was making fun of that monk for what he did. But here we are in 2024, and not even 24 hours after this guy's death, we have very, very popular YouTube/Twitch streamers making funny jokes on Twitter at his expense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm known for having like some dark humor, but that was one I really didn't touch, honestly. I mean, if some people laugh at it, you know, humor is subjective. I look at it that way. I'm not going to get mad if people like, you know, laugh about it. I just didn't. Just because like I thought it was tragic, honestly. There's a lot really to uncover when it comes down to Israel and Palestine. And I feel like I don't think in my lifetime or our lifetime we're ever going to see peace in that region, honestly. Like it's I know they're talking about peace talks and but until it happens, I'm not holding up much hope right now. And I just wonder, are we just going to continue to let Israel just run roughshod and just basically do whatever they want to? Because, like, if we put a stop to them, like, I think, like, what's going to happen is, you know, people are being very, very critical of Biden about this. And I get why. I completely understand. You know, it's fair criticism. I just feel like he's in a really, really tough spot because if he supports Israel, he supports genocide. If he supports Palestine, he's anti-Semitic. It's just... it might sound simplistic, but that's just the way I'm looking at it. And I know that, you know, the conservative base is just salivating at his next move. It's like, oh, see, look, now he's going to help the Gazans, but guess what? He's not going to do anything for Israel, even though he is helping Israel. I mean, feel free to let me know what you think about that.
I think that Biden is in a very, very desperate place right now. I think the DNC has come to realize that they fucked up here. I don't think that they thought that they fucked up until fairly recently, but this fairly recent pivot that we've seen, and it's been a very, very intentional pivot, if you're paying attention, of the Biden administration to somewhat cater to the moderate, like conservative, centrist base over the last few weeks is a very, very calculated move because they know that he's in trouble come November. Being that he's up against Trump was probably the best thing that could have happened to him because Trump isn't pulling the numbers that he should be pulling for someone that was once a Republican president. But I think that with Joe Biden's situation, it wouldn't have mattered what he said or what he did because people very quickly uncovered the reality of the situation, which when is it not money? It's always money. And that's the reality of it. At this point, any politician, including Joe Biden, including Kamala Harris, any politician that tweets out in support of Israel, you have thousands upon thousands of activists in the replies in the quote tweets pointing out how much it is that they're taking from AIPAC. So the jig is up at this point, and Joe Biden and the establishment Democrats are never going to be able to pull back the support that they've lost during this situation. The DNC would be smart to start to make the shift towards more progressive candidates and supporting more progressive candidates, which is something that they've actively been fighting against for the last 2 or 3 elections. But the reality is that people are growing tired of it, and the boomer generation, for better or worse, is starting to die off. You know, the establishment is losing its base support, and this newer generation of voters are just not, they don't care. They don't care about the logistics. They're very much like me in that way. We care about the people. We care about the fact that people are hurting, people are suffering and hurting around the world, and a lot of it is because of America's protecting American interests. People are suffering in America because America is too busy protecting its foreign interests to focus on the people that are hurting here. And Joe Biden, he's not in a tough spot anymore. He's in the only spot that he can be in. And if he were smart and the DNC was smart, they would begin to realize that they've lost the support that they need to continue down the path that they're on.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment, I would say. You know, and this might sound terrible, but I'm still going to vote for him just because, like, I can't fathom another Trump presidency. That's just me, though. It's just like, you know, I'm very critical when he screws up, but there's some things that I've liked. But we're not going to get into that any further. But when I look at situations like this, like what's going on, I think it's just the reason why it's so easy for us to support Israel as of right now is just because we've supported them for so long or something like that, and it's just like that's our excuse. The Palestinians really mean nothing to us, I think. Like, and now I'm not talking about, like, you know, people like you or people like me and stuff like. I mean, like, America as a whole. Like, even though we've got Palestinians living here in this country, we've got a Palestinian that's in Congress from this state, but it still doesn't matter. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head when it says we like to think that America has come so far, but we haven't. There are times like where I feel like we've gone one step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back. It's just like we seem to just keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's much easier for us to, like, just, if we have no interest in that region, who cares? Why should we worry about them? They mean nothing to us. And I truly do believe that. And I'm not saying we need to go out and save everybody, because that's impossible. Because I'm a pretty good studier of history. Empires fall because they try to handle everybody else's problems, but they can't fix their own problems back home. It happened with the Roman Empire. It happened when Genghis Khan passed away and, like, nobody knew how to control like he did, essentially. Everything just kind of collapsed. The British had the same problems. We're going to have the same problems as well, because first off, we can't fix our problems back home, but we're going to try to fix everybody's problems abroad. And we're trying to fix a problem between Israel and Palestine, which has been raging for 70 years now, I think it is. Almost 70 years.
More than that, I mean, because you can trace back the conflict to before Israel was even established, and Israel's 75 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a shaky ground, and it's like I said, I really wish there would, like, be an easier solution. And even if Hamas was to give back all the hostages, I don't think it's going to solve anything. It'd be nice for them to come home, but I don't know if it's really going to solve anything. It's just they'll come home. But will Israel just keep pushing the attack? Is Israel just going to keep going forward until they have everything they want, which is, from the looks of it, looks like they want the entire damn country. They want Gaza, they want Rafah, they want everything, essentially. I mean, are they going to try to kick out all of Palestine? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm just wondering, what's their end game? What are they hoping to do? Because it's not to wipe out Hamas, honestly.
Yeah, and that's the reality of it. I mean, the current sitting government right now has been completely open about the fact that even if they get all of the hostages back, they would continue with the attack, the planned attack on Rafah. This has never been about Hamas, and it's definitely never been about getting the hostages back. And the reality is that back in 2023, there were multiple instances where Hamas made statements to the Israeli government telling them that if they did not come to the table and negotiate with them about the release of Palestinian hostages that they have in their detainment centers, that something like October 7th was going to happen and hostages would be taken for hostage exchange. Israel ignored them. And the reality is that is not the only reason why October 7th happened, because if that was the only reason why October 7th happened, then only hostages would have been taken and nobody would have died. So obviously that's not the only goal for October 7th, and I do condemn violence. I don't think that we can build a world where peace exists through violence. That's antithetical. It doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So I don't condone violence, but if we're going to stop violent things from happening, we have to understand why they happen. And first and foremost, this attack was planned because there are thousands of Palestinian hostages being held in Israeli prisons, and this includes children, and they are subjected to absolutely horrifyingly awful conditions. They are tortured. They are sexually abused. That includes men and children, not just women. And these are well documented things. They have been documented by several human rights organizations, both in and outside of Israel. So whenever we're talking about, what the goal is, and you have Israel supporters being like, well, they could end this right now if they just gave the hostages back. That's not going to end anything. And the reality is that even if we were to get a permanent ceasefire, people like to talk about how there was a permanent ceasefire on October 6th. That just meant that Palestinians were dying more quietly and nobody was paying attention, because Palestinians continued to die during the temporary ceasefires, and they have always continued to die during the permanent ceasefires.
It's interesting that when people talk about like Palestinians, like why do we, like for me being a progressive, why would I show any support for Palestinians, right? Because they're so, because like they're very intolerant towards women, they're very anti-LGBTQ plus. It's like that's never stopped us before. We're friends with Saudi Arabia. They're known for like being anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ plus, but because we have a financial agreement with them, we have something to gain from them, we look the other way. And I think that's something people tend to forget. We have no problem having relations with people that are anti-LGBTQ plus, but the second it's something like Palestine, that's a different story for some reason. I mean, we're friends with Uganda. If you're gay in Uganda, you get the death penalty. That hasn't stopped us. No president is going to touch those issues. They're not going to touch countries that we have good diplomatic relations with. We'll just kind of look the other way. It's unfortunate. It's horrible. I mean, Michael Hilliard told me, like, when it comes to geopolitics, there's never a good case scenario or a bad case scenario. It's just option A or option B. And that's just the cold hard truth of it, honestly. It's just, it's horrible. I know I keep saying that.
I think that a lot of us are having a hard time stomaching it this time around, because this is probably the most well-documented genocide to ever exist. Like, there has never been something like this that we've literally watched in real time from tiny little screens that we can carry around with us everywhere. And it makes it incredibly easy and both hard to digest, because it's right there. But it's like, how are we watching this horror unfold right in front of us and have absolutely no ability to do anything to stop it?
Yeah. We see it happen, but again, we have nothing to gain from Palestine, so why bother? I mean, that's like the only conclusion I can come to, essentially. And again, if people think, oh, we just hate you, it's not the case. That's not it. We recognize the pain and the suffering, and as somebody that has seen horrific things in war, I can tell you, there's nothing glorious about it. There's nothing glorious about war. There's nothing glorious about seeing men, women, and children die. There's nothing good about it. It's horrifying to watch. It changes your perception completely. And, I remember, like, what was it? When I told you about the hospital that was at Al Yarmouk Hospital in Baghdad, I pretty much saw every single injury you could possibly think of come through there. I saw men, women, and children die in that hospital. And I tell you, seeing a child die is a horrific thing to observe. It's something that I still think about all the time. And, I wouldn't say that, like, I have a hard time coping with it. I accept there's nothing I could do to change it. But it's just like, I think about it all the time. It's always in the back of my mind. And I can just, I don't think I could ever bring myself to actually, like, want to harm, what was it? Like, do the things that I've seen. Like, I've seen you share a video of, like, where they blindfolded a guy and had him, like, walk, and then they shot him before he reached the other side. I don't think I could ever do that. I mean, if I would, that's serial killer stuff. That's like, we would never allow this or do it. I mean, like, let's just say, like,
at least openly.
Yeah.
If U.S. soldiers were doing this as openly as Israeli soldiers are, you would be hard pressed to find someone that wouldn't condemn it, because it makes Americans look insane. It makes us look genocidal and homicidal and awful. It reflects very, very horribly on American values. So even the most pro-military conservative, out in the middle of Texas that, has every, all those banners for all of the different branches of the military on his wall, is a huge supporter of our military, would condemn something like that, because everybody with a brain knows that that's going to reflect on our country as a whole. And I don't understand why more Israeli citizens aren't concerned about that.
I think before we close up on this topic is, like, I look at it like this. If you can justify doing it to one group of people, you can justify doing it to just about anybody. I mean, this is why I am so firmly against torture, because I feel like when I found out that, like, waterboarding was being done, waterboarding's torture. I don't care what anybody says. But like I said, if you could justify, for the sake of national security, we got to waterboard these people, you can basically use that for any reason whatsoever. So that's why, like, when people say, well, listen, we're just going to bomb a few locations, it's because to protect ourselves. You can pretty much justify doing it to anybody. If you can justify doing it to one group of people. So that's my final thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that if you can take a situation and revert that situation to involve an American city, American citizens, American children, and you're suddenly not okay with it, then you probably shouldn't be okay with it if we're doing it in other countries.
100% agree. So, anyway, ready to move on to the next topic?
Let's do it.
All right. So, earlier this week, the U.S. House of Representatives voted to ban the social media app TikTok, which has 2 billion users as of right now, making it one of the most popular social media apps in the world, with over 170 million Americans using it right now. The bill passed with 352 yeas, 65 nays, and 1 abstain. There has been a great deal of controversy surrounding the app. The CEO of TikTok, Shou Zi-Chu, testified before both Congress and the Senate, and one of the most viral videos that actually occurred happened about a couple weeks ago. It was between him and Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who questioned him on his heritage, no surprise, and his nationality, whether or not he had any citizenship to any other country, and lastly, if he was a citizen of China, to which he answered multiple times, he never has been a citizen of China. He was not born in China. He actually served in the Singapore military, and he's never applied for citizenship in China. But, he answered him honestly and truthfully, and he looked at him like he was an idiot. He's like, Senator, I'm Singaporean. I've never been a citizen of China. But, however, he recently refused to state whether or not the Chinese government has had any influence over TikTok. Now, despite the fact that apparently TikTok has banned certain videos that have showed the disgusting treatment of Uyghur Muslims and not showing any anti-Chinese government content. Now, I haven't seen any of this. There's probably a reason for that. Now, those who wrote the bill insisted it's not trying to ban free speech. It's not trying to prevent people from getting on and using it as a platform, but to ensure the Chinese government doesn't control the analytics, the information, the videos, and influence people what they see on TikTok. Now, I tried reading the bill, but here's the thing. I'm kind of a moron, okay? I can't understand legal jargon whatsoever. And that's pretty much what it was. It's not a very long bill, but like half of it I couldn't understand because they threw almost so much legal jargon in there. So I tried reading summaries of it, and it still didn't make too much sense. But all in all, the bill stated that ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, has 165 days to comply with the sale of TikTok to a buyer who will possibly do a better job of safeguarding people's information and ensure people are not being influenced by foreign agents and governments. Now, I've got TikTok. You've got TikTok. I don't have a large following. Once again, not a big deal. I just go on there. The reason I like going on TikTok is I like watching, cute animal videos, watching dog videos, because I got a friend of mine. We share dog video content all the time. If I see something funny, I'll show it to my wife and stuff like that. I mean, I used to hate TikTok, but now I'm stuck on it. Like, I've got a few videos myself on there. But, like, it's entertaining, but it's useless entertainment. If it went away tomorrow, I really wouldn't care. But I see the necessity that it has for some people to use it as a platform. I see the inherent danger behind it, too. Like, I know people are afraid of, like, their children getting influenced by it, but that's where parenting comes in, honestly. If you don't want your kids on TikTok, don't let them be on TikTok kind of deal. I mean, it's easy for me to say I'm not a parent. But, I was raised by 2 good parents that, didn't want me subjected to something, so they would keep me away from it. But I just look at this like this. Do I think that, the U.S. government is just looking to capitalize on this and say, hey, this is the most powerful app right now. What if we were able to just take control of it, sell it to somebody else that is in our interest, and then we just make a buttload of money off of this? Part of me is thinking that could be the case, but I have no proof to back this up. At the same time, though, is it true that the Chinese government has some stock in this? I don't know. I looked this up all week, and I found no evidence proving any of this stuff. So what do you think about this, Kay?
Well, I actually do have some interesting information in regards to what the motivation for the United States government with this bill is. And I actually got that information from TikTok because one of the reasons why the United States government is so scared, and they are scared of this app, is because it is incredibly informative. I actually put out a tweet the other day because, everybody's making these jokes about, like, you probably get your news from TikTok. I get a lot of information from TikTok. I get information from TikTok, and then I go and I use my adult brain in my adult head, and I see if there's any validity behind the information that I was given on TikTok. And 9 times out of 10, there is a lot of validity behind the things that these, investigative TikTokers are saying. And one in particular did an experiment where he talked about the corruption of the Chinese Communist Party. He talked about the corruption of the Chinese government. He even used all of the hashtags associated with talking about the potential corruption behind the Chinese government. And there was absolutely no suppression of that video. But then he went and he posted a video talking about AIPAC's influence on trying to find a buyer for TikTok in the United States that is incredibly pro-Israel. And he put all of the necessary hashtags on that video and he posted it. And this is somebody that has a very, very large following. But that video instantly got suppressed. And he put the exact same video out without the hashtags, and that video soared. It did great. It got all of the numbers that he was expecting to get. So whenever we're having a conversation about what foreign governments we should be worried that are influencing what we're seeing on our TikTok For You pages, the first government on that list is not the Chinese government.
Really? That's interesting.
And the interesting thing is that they're not even trying to hide it. There are Israeli news sources coming out of Jerusalem talking about how there is I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but there is a buyer in the United States that is volleying to buy TikTok right now, that is incredibly pro-Israel and is 100% backed by AIPAC. AIPAC put out a statement talking about how the number one danger that they're facing right now is the influence that TikTok is having on younger voters and the influence of Palestinian content. And TikTok has worked very, very hard to try to suppress pro-Palestinian content. Just the content creators are finding a way around it. So TikTok has actively tried to silence information. It's just not in regards to the Chinese government. And in spite of their efforts, TikTokers are just getting around it anyway. Like, they don't care about the attempts to censor. They're still getting the information out there. And it's interesting how this effort was made to suppress pro-Palestinian content for weeks. Big creators that make largely just conversation, like just content talking about Palestine, have been noticing suppression for over a month at this point. And then whenever that suppression didn't work, we see this TikTok ban come up and get almost in completely bipartisan support.
Wow. I didn't even know anything about that. So you taught me something I didn't know. That makes it even worse, in my opinion.
Well, and I think it's interesting because what a lot of people are not talking about, like what you said, like if it went away, if this went away tomorrow, you wouldn't widely be affected by it. But more importantly, just than people using it as the platform that they make content on, there is a ton of people that use TikTok as their small business or as their primary source of income. So whenever you're talking about potentially banning TikTok or having it change hands that will absolutely affect the people that make money on that platform, whenever you start messing with people's income, it's a lot different than messing with people's freedom of speech. People are going to get a lot more angry, a lot more heated whenever you start messing with their primary sources of income.
Oh yeah, and, I wasn't trying to say people shouldn't be offended. I'm just saying me personally, I would be affected, but I understand that because whether people realize it or not, content creation is a job. So that's how some people make their living, whether it's on Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Kick. That's how some people make their living, essentially. I don't have to worry about that. I have a pension, and I also still have a full-time job. I kind of just do this as a hobby. Anyway, my thing is just I only worry about the fact that it had such overwhelming support, and a lot of the dissenting votes, they didn't really specify as to why, but a lot of people was oh, this is for our national security. It's well, I keep hearing for our national security, and I just brought it up again. For our national security. You're doing this to protect us, essentially. Who are you protecting us from? And you just said it's not the Chinese government. So that makes it even scarier to think if it's not the Chinese government, then who are you protecting us from? From ourselves? I mean, I mean, like I said, I use TikTok just like to watch entertaining videos, essentially. But the fact that you're telling me that there's people that are making content because here's what I'll ask: are people using TikTok to like live stream what's going on in Palestine at times, and that gets suppressed?
There are a few Palestinians on the ground that have used it over the past several months. I know Basan is a really, really big presence on TikTok. People really, really like her live streams. It gives her an opportunity to interact with people. It gives people an opportunity, because of how TikTok works and because of how their lives work, it gives people the opportunity to give money and gifts directly to her through her phone. And so it has been used that way, but overwhelmingly it has been used by advocates and people that are educated on this subject, making sure that their audiences are getting updates in real time. This is what's happening. This is why it's happening. This is the information that you need to know. This is misinformation, and here's how you can combat that misinformation if you see it. And yeah, if I was somebody like APAC, I would be incredibly worried about the amount of information that flows through TikTok, because it is a lot of information. And these TikTokers can back up the information that they're sharing with facts and research. And the thing about TikTok is they are scary good. Once they have a scent on something, these content creators are scary good at finding information that would otherwise have been buried. I will never forget coming across this woman that she was talking about the Mandela effect and how Fruit of the Loom, the brand Fruit of the Loom, she could have sworn that on their logo they had a cornucopia. At one point, there was a cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo. And even Fruit of the Loom themselves came out and said they have never had a cornucopia on their logo. It's part of the Mandela effect. She went and dug through her husband's closet, found an old ratty shirt with an old Fruit of the Loom logo on it that had the cornucopia, led her down a rabbit hole of lawsuits by Fruit of the Loom that led to, there was some kind of cancerous material in their cotton that caused a bunch of people to get cancer. And there was part of a rebranding attempt to remove the cornucopia because it was associated with this lawsuit. And this is just a random, she's a stay-at-home mom like me, just a random TikToker. But she found something that kind of gave her the ick, rubbed her the wrong way, went down the rabbit hole, and then shared that information with millions of people that otherwise would not have known. And you have thousands of content creators doing that with what's going on in Israel right now.
That's crazy. I didn't even know anything about the Fruit of the Loom bit.
I know, it's wild.
I mean, the thing is, there are some conspiracy theories out there that are just that's batshit crazy, but that one actually carries some validity to it, honestly. And because I think what's good about, because I actually watched a video on TikTok today, and it was a Palestinian woman talking about this is the 5th day of Ramadan, and we're trying to go get food, but we can't. We're fasting through the day, but we can't get food at night. Now, having been in Iraq, I can tell you that I found out there are some exceptions to the Muslim faith. If you are unable to eat at nighttime when you're not supposed to be fasting, you're allowed to eat during the daytime, essentially. So, but that doesn't make it any better. There's people that are starving, and this woman is basically saying you have to know what's going on here, and it's this is horrible, because it is. And social media is a very, very powerful tool because everybody's on it. I always talk about how this generation should be the most technically savvy and should be the smartest, but at times I feel like we're the dumbest, but we are always on our phones. I'm guilty of this. My wife is always telling me, you're always on your phone. I'm I know, I'm sorry. It's just, I got put on blast at a restaurant for being on my phone as well, but, just, that's my own fault. But the thing is, I do it because, I not just to see, all the dumb arguments I can get in with people and their stupid red pill talks, but it's also because, I like to see what's going on around the world. I like to see what people are saying, what people are thinking, essentially. And also, if I'm going to be a figure, it's not my intention, but, if I'm going to build a platform here, I have to keep myself informed to what's going on. And even if it's information I'm not comfortable with, I have to learn these things. This is why I'm willing to have in-depth conversations. Even if it might make me uncomfortable, that's kind of the point. That's why I feel with history needs to be taught correctly. For years, I learned that I thought Christopher Columbus was a hero. Kind of find out the guy was a fucking scumbag. The guy was a genocidal monster. But it's just those are uncomfortable truths that I feel we have to learn about these things. And that's why I feel social media can be a very powerful tool. And, I didn't know TikTok was being used to, like, spread the message, like, this is what's going on in Palestine. And, salutes to the people that are doing that. Do you think, like, Twitter or X is, like, covering anything up, or do you think that they've been pretty good about showing what's going on in Palestine and Israel?
I think that X is in a pretty similar boat that TikTok was in their attempt to. I don't know if Elon Musk's platform was actively suppressing pro-Palestine content the way that TikTok definitely was. But for me, I do not follow. I have one mutual that I have done podcasts with in the past, and he's Jewish, and he is on the opposing side to me on this conflict. But that is the only person that is actively on my following list that posts pro-Israel content. Yet, anytime I'm opening up Twitter and I'm scrolling through my feed, I'm just going in and muting these Twitter have not interacted with these accounts at all. These are huge accounts that are peddling blatant Israeli misinformation that I just go in and I mute the account because it's like, why is this showing up on my? There's absolutely no reason why it should be.
Yeah, I gotcha. There are times like where like if I see something, it's like it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Not worth it. Because like I know all they're gonna do is just make me blow a blood vessel. But then there are times I find myself arguing with dumb people anyway. It's a curse.
Well, whenever it comes to specifically the Israel-Palestine conflict, I refuse to engage. After I read that report about how the state of Israel actually pays people to argue with other people on social media in their defense, like, I'm not going to waste my time, my free time that nobody is paying me for, to argue with someone that's getting paid to make me mad.
Well, when I find out that people get paid for stuff like this, I'm like, shit, you get paid for this? Oh my god. Like, I don't get paid for this. I mean, I'm on it all the time too.
It's one of the reasons, like, it's one of many reasons why I kind of exited the debate sphere of Twitch and YouTube, because it's like, you make a lot of money to come on this and argue with me. I'm not making any money off of this, and you're just annoying.
Yeah. Like, what was the last debate aside from like the tomfoolery one? Was there one that you did before that?
I kind of pulled away from the debate sphere back whenever I started my organization, just because I was so incredibly busy. Mm-hmm. I've done one or two debates over the last year. I'm kind of a lot of people's go-to whenever people want to debate abortion.
Yep.
But it's just like, it gets kind of exhausting because, number one, being that my topic of choice is abortion, people want to debate me on abortion. Sure. And I tell people all the time, like, I don't debate abortion, but I'll have a conversation with you about it, because I don't think that abortion is something that we should debate about. Just like I don't really think that Israel and Palestine, people are dying. I don't think this is something that we should be debate broing over.
Yeah.
But people don't want that. They want the blood sports. They want the debate bro, and I'm not a debate bro.
No, they love blood sports, and I'll be honest, I'm not a good debater at times. There are times where like I just get stuck. I get myself painted into a corner. But, that's why I like to have conversations about it, because, like, that way it can remain civil. And, like, that's why, like, even if I disagree on something, like, which so far you and I pretty much agreed on almost every single thing. So, but I think it's important that we have these conversations, even if it makes other people that watch this uncomfortable. There's a reason why we're saying these conversations, because people have to hear what we are saying. And people have to know, listen, just because, like, we may not agree on something, it's important that we get our points of view across. I think that's far, far more important. So, and if people want blood sports, go watch blood sports. I'm not a blood sports kind of guy. Like, I'll engage and I'll, like, yell at somebody if I think they're being a moron. But it really depends. Like, I'm not just going to come out the gate and just start insulting people and tell them that, their mom wears combat boots or something like that. I'm just going to be, like, I'll remain good faith. But if you piss me off, okay, that's a different story then. So, but anyway, we're kind of getting off topic. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So, was there anything else you want to kind of like weigh in on TikTok, or do you want to move on to your last topic?
No, I think one last thing that people need to realize is that the American-run social media companies are also harvesting your data. None of your data is safe, and they can just as easily sell that to the Chinese government or any other government that they want to. If the United States government was actually interested in, like, protecting your information and your data, this would not be the way to do it. It's a ridiculous argument to make that they're trying to protect our information and our data from the Chinese government. That's not at all what is going on here.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up, but I completely forgot. I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, people purchase and sell your information already, not just the U.S. government. So I think we just need a bad guy. We need a villain, but as long as it's the right villain. I mean, people are still harping up on, what happened with COVID and blame China. Then everybody just, look, Asian attack kind of deal. It's just like we need a nemesis or something like that to keep us motivated, it seems. It's ridiculous.
It is sad. It is a sad state of affairs. I feel like it's part of the American problem of just manufacturing distractions so that we don't have to acknowledge the fact that we are massively falling behind other countries in terms of progress on a number of levels. I feel like the Industrial Revolution in the United States really, really took off, and we were so proud of it, but then we stalled out. And instead of trying to continue on in our progress and work as hard as we had been working through the Industrial Revolution, we kind of flattened out. And from there, it was just distract people from the fact that we're not progressing. Distract people. We moved through the Roaring 20s and through the 30s, and then we had the Great Depression, and then we had the World Wars, and then you move into the 50s, and it's just consumerism, distraction. And a part of that was trying to get women back into the kitchen and back into the home after they had been pushed out into the workforce during World War II. But a lot of it was just distraction. Make people believe that this is the greatest country in the world, and the American dream is the greatest thing that you can ever achieve. And it's just been decade after decade of one distraction after another distraction after another distraction.
Yeah, nothing bothers me more. Again, I love my country, but nothing bothers me more than American exceptionalism. Like saying we're the greatest country in the world. I always go back to the Jeff Daniels series on Newsroom. America is no longer the greatest country. It's true though. Like, I don't know if the stats are the same or if they were accurate back then. But the thing is, like, it's true. We are no longer the greatest country. We belittle intelligence. We think we allow people that are not that smart to get into power, but yet we belittle those that are actually intelligent, that actually make a career out of these things. And, we aspire to be better, but we don't do that anymore. I mean, like, it's insane. I really don't feel like at any point in our history we've done great in certain categories, but we have failed in many, many other categories. Like the 50s, we built the interstate systems, right? Which is important because, and Eisenhower had that for a specific reason. Infrastructure is one of my favorite topics, by the way. But, it was the most expansive bit of infrastructure that the United States did. Now, there was a purpose behind it. It was to be able to get our military from one side of the country to the next rapidly. That was the purpose behind the interstate system because he saw the Audubon. So, basically, we took a Nazi design and brought it to the United States, essentially. We just didn't use the slave labor to do it. However, what else was going on in the 1950s? Segregation, So it's just you can't really point to one part in history where everything was just hunky-dory, fantastic, America was perfect in every way. You can't point that out, so. But,
yeah, well, and what Americans need to realize is that imperialism plays a really, really big part in that. Because think about it. If you are in control, say, you're in control of an apartment building. If you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing as the person that runs that apartment building, making sure people have everything that they need, making sure everything's running properly, making sure everything is where it needs to be whenever it needs to be there, you don't have time to be worrying about the apartment building down the street. And you sure as heck do not have time to go and fight the person that is running that apartment building so that you can take that apartment building from them. If we took a moment in American history to just solely focus on the problems that we were having here instead of looking around at everything else that was going on around us and how we could benefit from the problems that other countries were facing at the time, how much better off would this country be, and how much more would we have excelled in our efforts to make progress?
Very well stated, absolutely. Speaking of what's going on in our country, go ahead with your last topic.
Okay, so you heard about this, right? This is insane. Even as a pro-life person, I did not know that this was the case, but somebody brilliant, I don't know who, I did not go that far down the rabbit hole, discovered that there is a bylaw in Mississippi right now that makes it illegal for women to divorce their husbands while they are pregnant. This is horrifying. And for somebody that is anti-abortion, this is exactly what I was telling the pro-life movement back whenever I was still in the pro-life movement, whenever there were conversations starting to circulate 2018, 2019 about Roe v. Wade being overturned. I started expressing concern. Do we have all of our ducks in a row here? the potential fallout of Roe being overturned. Are we looking at what is going on in individual states? Do we have protections for rape victims? Do we have protections for their babies? I know that there are still multiple states where rapists still have parental rights. What are we doing about that? Like, all of these things, this would have been caught if the pro-life movement had been doing what they said that they were doing in their effort to protect women while also trying to overturn Roe v. Wade. The reality is that the pro-life movement doesn't give a shit about women. But this is something that should have been caught before Roe v. Wade happened. And this is something that the pro-life movement absolutely should be on top of, and they're not. Nobody seems to be on top of it. Everybody's just like, hey, this is happening. Nothing's being done about it, though.
That's just completely insane. When I first heard about that, I was like, holy shit. And I think I talked to my wife about this. And I think what bothers me so much about this is because when people say, let's get a no-fault divorce. Well, I say no-fault divorce is a good thing because the reason why that got put in place is because back in the day, women could not divorce their husbands even if their husbands were abusive. No-fault divorce basically saves them. Now, I've known people that, they got divorced from their wife. They got a no-fault divorce because, she was cheating on them kind of deal. It sucks. It's terrible. I feel his pain. I understand that it's a terrible thing to go through. But I think about the women that, back in the day that couldn't escape their husbands. Some of them were in war. They suffer from shell shock. And it's just it got too chaotic. Like they tried to help them, but they just couldn't do anything about it. Or their husband's an alcoholic. He blows his whole entire paycheck on booze. And when he comes home, he wants more alcohol, but there's none in the house. So he takes it on the wife and the children and stuff like that. And, it's like this was like a safe haven for them. Like they could divorce their husbands through no fault. And I feel like that has helped out more women than it's hurt, essentially. Now the fact that, if a woman wants to get away from an abusive husband, but then she's pregnant, she can't do that anymore. So now she's at risk. Because then, what if she wanted to divorce him, but now she can't anymore? It puts her in a really, really tricky bind. Because then, what if the next time he beats me, A, let's say I want to keep this baby, but B, he beats me so bad I have a miscarriage. I mean, it's such a tricky situation. It's such a horrible situation to think of. It just seems like, a woman's rights have just went out the door. Who cares?
And I beg people that condone this law to look into the statistics about pregnant women that end up murdered by the father of their children and how high that statistic is. I believe that, I don't know if this is still true, but I believe at one point it was actually the leading cause of death for pregnant women was homicide at the hands of a romantic partner. These are very, very dangerous situations. Women in crisis pregnancies, which if you're in an abusive situation, overwhelmingly, these are going to be unplanned pregnancies. These women are at incredible risk. And for me, it's really, really horrifying to realize that Mississippi was one of the leading states in the charge of attempting to get Roe back in front of the Supreme Court so it could be overturned, yet they entirely overlooked the existence of this law in their state.
And what's amazing is the fact that, looking at this, states like Mississippi, it's one of the poorest states in the nation. It has the highest, I think it has, aside from New Mexico, it has, the most welfare recipients. Its infrastructure is terrible. Its school systems are terrible. Its healthcare is awful. Well, America's
healthcare. It has a high infant and maternal mortality rate.
I mean, the healthcare system in the country is already a joke. I mean, I have no problem saying that, but places like in red states, it's especially bad. And so it makes it even harder. It makes and I would imagine it would even make the pro-life thing even harder in states like that because what's it called? Infant mortality rate. I think you just said it's high. Maternity leave essentially is probably really difficult in red states usually. And what's the word I'm looking for? It's maternal health care or something like that, so what women can get taken care of down there. Makes it even harder in some states like that. Those are this just adds more to it. It's some woman's why the fuck do I live in this state? Why do I live in Mississippi? I have no rights here. What's going on here?
Well, and this is goes back to the point that I made at the beginning of the show and talking about how, they're actively hurting their own cause. Like this, and this is what I tried to explain to, the problem with the pro-life movement is that it's overwhelmingly right-wing and conservative. So whenever you start having conversations about things like paid maternity leave or universal prenatal care or making birth free, they don't even want to hear it because it's like, that's socialism. Can't talk about that. Brain short-circuiting. But the reality is that they are actively undermining their cause whenever they're overturning something like Roe v. Wade with absolutely no plan in place. And then you have states like Alabama and Mississippi where you have very, very high infant and maternal mortality rates. Pregnant women are dying. Their infants are dying. This is a problem. And people are going to look at that, and you're actively going to lose support for the pro-life positions because it's like, oh, we actually needed abortion because look what is happening now that it is outlawed. Whereas if they had gone about this the smart and diplomatic way of putting those social safety nets in place, bolstering the prenatal healthcare system, bolstering support for women that are going through postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis, helping them get access to maternity care, postpartum care, infant care whenever their babies are born. This is actively going to bolster support for the pro-life position because it's like, look, women can do this and we can bring maternal mortality rates down, infant mortality rates down. This isn't going to cause a spike in women dying and infants dying. People are going to look at the spike in women and infants dying and actively start to recoil from the position of making abortion illegal.
Yeah. Do you think, like, are there other states that are like Mississippi, do you think, that, or is Mississippi the only one that where it says, like, if a woman gets pregnant, she can't leave her spouse then? Is that the only state as of right now?
I think that's the only thing, because, like, people discovered this, like, digging through, like, pages and pages and pages of bylaws. I'd be willing to bet that there are several red states that if you were willing to dig far enough to find it, you're going to find a lot of not good stuff. I mean, child marriage laws were still a thing 5 years ago in multiple states. Like, we have not progressed as far as protecting women and girls in any significant way in this country.
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, like, it took years to, like, bring that cult leader down in Utah. I mean, he was married, like, they were marrying young girls as young as, like, 13 or 14 off to guys that are, like, in their 60s. I mean...
Yeah, and like, people want to believe that, like, whenever law enforcement is made aware of these situations, that there's, like, this dire urgency to go in and save these girls. Girls that are being essentially trafficked. That's the way that I look at it. You're marrying off your 13, 14-year-old girl to a 60-year-old man. You're trafficking your child, and that's just the reality of it. I don't care what the law says. That is child trafficking. Whenever you hear these stories about these girls basically being trafficked, I think that, like, what happened in Waco is the perfect example. Like, they knew that David Koresh was marrying 14, 15-year-old girls. What drew them in was not the fact that he was molesting children. It was the gun charges. It was the cult-like mindset. It had nothing to do with saving those girls. The FBI and the ATF couldn't have given a shit about those girls. And girls are overwhelmingly an afterthought. The abuse victim is overwhelmingly the afterthought whenever it comes to law enforcement going in and saving or rescuing these girls or these women.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrific to think about because, like, human trafficking is actually a topic that I've been following very, very closely since, like, 2019. When I first started learning about it was, like, when Dolph Lundgren gave a TED Talk on it. And then I actually attended a human trafficking rally in DeKalb County, Georgia. And it was really eye-opening experience. It is, in, like, the fact that it's still the second largest criminal enterprise in the world. And it brings in, like, the most people that are trafficked are for, like, labor. But the one that brings in the most money is the sex trafficking victims. And, I shudder whenever I think about, like, the horrors that they go through, essentially. And now I shudder to think about, like, American citizens, women in this country, in one state, their partner is very abusive. And, like, now they can't escape them if they get pregnant. Especially, if they didn't want to get pregnant by this guy. They want to start a family, but they don't want to get a family with this guy kind of deal because he's verbally abusive, he's physically abusive. Now they've got no way out, essentially. Like, that scares the hell out of me. And I'm not a woman, I'm a guy. That scares me even to think about.
Yeah, it's why I get so frustrated in these conversations with, I read about it every once in a while just to remind people how much I hate abolitionists. I cannot stand them. I think that they are the scummiest people on the planet. I think that looking at a situation like abortion, where the battleground is essentially inside a woman's body, and a lot of these women are in incredibly complex and precarious and sometimes very dangerous situations, for you to say that she's a murderer, that she's a horrible human being, condemn her to hell, condemn her to prison for the rest of her life, because in that desperate situation where she had absolutely no way out, she turned to an abortion. I have had I have a hard time saying privilege, because it was one of the most heartbreaking experiences in my life, having a human trafficking survivor reach out to me through social media and establishing a relationship with her, because she was on the brink of suicide, because she felt so much guilt over the abortions that she had been forced into at the hands of her traffickers. Yep. And it shattered my soul to hear the horrors that this girl had experienced before she even reached adulthood. And having to carry around the burden of another thing that she had absolutely no control over, but was harboring so much pain and so much guilt for it. I think that people truly, truly, truly fail to understand and empathize and humanize the women that have had these experiences. It is heartbreaking. It crushes your soul whenever you take the time to open up your heart and mind to truly understand what these women have gone through.
Yeah, it's... when I did one podcast before, are you familiar with who Annie Lobert is?
I've heard the name.
I've talked to her before, and I talked specifically about human trafficking because she's a former call girl, and she shared with me her experiences. Now, more than likely, she and I disagree politically because she's very conservative, but she's a very nice woman. She was very gracious to share with me her story, but it was also very gut-wrenching to hear what she had to say, because she talked about like being locked inside of a small room and stuff like that. Her trafficker came by, came in and just beat the hell out of her, and it's horrible to think about. Like, a friend of mine and I talked about how we think we got rid of slavery. No, it's just better. It's more hidden. Like, slavery still exists in this country. The greatest nation on earth, it still exists. And when I attended the human trafficking rally, the one thing I found out, do you know what's like the number one place where human trafficking takes place actually?
I would say sporting events.
Yep, you are 100% correct. Because people come in from all around the country, they pay all kinds of money, and traffickers, they prey on that. There's like Super Bowl's in Las Vegas, let's go to Vegas. Super Bowl is in Los Angeles, let's go to Los Angeles. I had never thought about that before. Like, it never even dawned on me that is a real thing, that sporting events is like the breeding grounds for traffickers and trafficking victims. And they said that there was like one victim of trafficking that a cop came up to her. She thought she was going to get arrested. And he told her, you can't be here. If you want to go do some work, you got to go up the street a ways, and then no one's going to bother you then. I was like, wow, holy shit. And I know people might wonder, is like, well, why are you guys talking about trafficking? Well, this all kind of ties in. It's all about rights of women, essentially. I mean, people might call me like a simp or, stuff like this, but it's just like, since when is it being a simp to recognize that, women are suffering, essentially? Like, this is a very real situation. I mean, then if people, what does this apply to you? Well, this might come as a surprise to you, but, there's a little bit of genetic history in my family. My sister's a woman, my mom's a woman, her mom was a woman. So, my wife and I ever had children, I might have a daughter because I am a carrier kind of deal. And yes, I stole that joke from a comedian, but it's true. Like, it means a great deal to me, Like, I can't imagine, like, my wife or anybody in my family that's a woman going through that. So why aren't we doing more about this, essentially? Like, I can't imagine anybody I know in a situation like where, if I knew a woman that was in an abusive situation, but she could not leave because she was pregnant, I would not know what to do. Like, would I get in more trouble for going down to Mississippi and, rescuing her from that situation? Would I get in trouble for kidnapping, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the issue, is, like, people don't even realize how complicated this could be in an effort to protect your family members, because how could you not make that effort? If, I have a daughter. If my daughter was in an abusive relationship and was stuck in that situation to where she couldn't get away from him because she's pregnant with his child, I hate to, I don't want to voice on on the internet what I think my husband would do in that situation, because you would get flagged for TOS.
Yeah.
But that is the reality of the situation. I mean, whenever we're having these conversations about women's rights, it's become so polarized in the United States of, feminists versus the anti-feminists, pro-life versus pro-choice, this, that, the other, women's liberation, so on and so forth. Apparently feminism is killing the nuclear family. I don't know how that happened, but okay. We're not having the actual conversations that need to be had about women's safety and protecting women. A woman was just stabbed to death going on the same jog on the same trail that she always runs, almost every single day. She goes out for her regular routine and doesn't come home. Like, this is the reality that women are living in. Mm-hmm. And we're even in the first world country like the United States, we can't acknowledge that this is the reality that women live in.
Yep. And people do want to make it like, well, this is an immigration issue. It's not. It's a women's safety issue, because women go through this all the time. It's just, I think about situations like that. And I also think about the woman that, Brock Turner raped, essentially, right? He got usually some people go to prison for years. He got a 6-month jail sentence. Jail, not prison, jail sentence. And he didn't even serve the full term of it. And his dad says, my son should not have to pay the penalty for a few minutes of fun. Fun. By that means that he had more rights, essentially, than she did, essentially. This is why some women are afraid to come forward, though, because they're afraid they're not going to get justice. They're going to get brought out to the spotlight. People are going to make a mockery of it. I mean, people are not going to take it seriously until it's already too late, until, like, the next victim happens. And again, I very, very, very much sympathize and I empathize with Laken Riley's situation, because she didn't do anything wrong. She went out for a jog. She never came home. But it's just like, people are politicizing this for the wrong reasons. Like, they're making this about an immigration issue. It's not just an immigration issue. It's a woman's safety issue. This is why, like, I believe there was a video out years ago where, women said, if there were no men around here, I would feel completely safe. That's why, because, like,
there was a trend going around on TikTok, of all places, a number of years ago, where it was like the two different sides, like, men, tell us what you would do if women disappeared for 24 hours. Women, tell us what you would do if men disappeared for 24 hours. And men, they gave the answer of, like, I wouldn't shower, I would eat I would eat my sandwich, my pizza, without putting a plate under it first. Like, I wouldn't use a coaster, all of these things. And women are like, I would go for a walk by myself at night. Like, I would wear that pair of shorts or that shirt that I never wear because I always get sexually harassed whenever I wear it. I would go out to a bar and get drunk knowing that I don't have to worry about being raped or kidnapped or murdered if I get intoxicated. Like, I think that people truly don't understand, like, the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, moment-to-moment struggle that women face from the minute that we walk out of our doors. And sometimes we don't even have to leave our house. My husband's not home and my doorbell rings. I go into a little bit of a state of a panic, because it's like 1,000,001 things can happen. And I'm on the internet to know that those things do happen to women all of the time. Yep. That we can't get, like, there's sometimes that we're not even safe in our homes. And, like, you add, for me, I have my 2 children. So anytime I'm going out, I have to worry about my safety and the safety of my kids. My head's on a swivel all of the time. And then people have the audacity to be like, well, if you're rude to men, it might hurt their feelings.
There has been some days, like, and I will openly admit this, when I got drunk, I did stupid things, I said stupid things, and I did catcalling, and I'm not proud of it, I think it's just, like, immaturity and probably just trying to be, like, impress my friends or something. I don't know. All I know is that it was unacceptable, and I just, when we would sometimes teach sexual harassment, assault, rape prevention classes, also known as SHARP classes in the Army, and I tried to use an example, and I told one guy, I was like, listen, don't take this seriously, but just tell me what you think of this. And I pretended like I was giving him the same look that, he might give an attractive woman or something. And he got a little uncomfortable about that. He's like, now think about, like, what she might be going through, essentially. And it's just like, when I think about, like, there are women that are afraid to like go out in public. That's why they like travel in groups essentially, because they have to like look out for one another, because men are predatory. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny about it. It's just true. We're just predatory people. Like we're on the hunt kind of deal. Like guys use that term all the time, and I'm guilty of it as well. And I'm not proud of these things. But it's just like when the older you get, and like once you've been married for a while, you look at it a different way. It's like, what if guys were catcalling my wife like that? How would I react? And just think about, and then like that's where the behavior comes back into play. And you just have to remember, it's like, this is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's mother, this is somebody's sister. It's just like, but I just feel like some people don't take that into account, really.
Yeah, it kind of happened the opposite way for me. I was raised in a very, very sheltered environment that was incredibly patriarchal. So I wasn't taught safety measures for being around men, but my husband and I got married really, really young. I was only 20 years old whenever we got married. And the first few years of our marriage was really, really funny because he would warn me. He's like, majority of men are pigs. They're scumbags. You need to be aware of this. Like, stay away from them. Be wary of them whenever you're out in public. And I'm like, you are being ridiculous. This is, that's unfair. That's an unfair categorization of men. Like, he's like, I am a man. I've been in male-centered environments my entire life. You need to be aware that so many of the men around you are scumbags, and they will take advantage of you, and they will victimize you if you give them the opportunity to. And as I've gotten older, I've, come to realize how correct he was, and how many situations that I had put myself in to where I was in danger. I was actively...
You were perfectly safe, and that's where you kind of cut
out. Yeah, that was the end of my rant.
Okay, no, but it's really important to know, because like, I was actually having a conversation like this earlier today on Twitter. You'll probably see it if you see like conversation I was having. It's really cringy, and I don't know why I engage with it, but like, I talk about like the fact that like, every day a woman out in public probably gets hit on in like hundreds of times a day, thousands of times a week and stuff. And so they've probably heard every single line in the book. Men, we don't have that problem really. It's so rare for a man to like, and like me, I'm too stupid to like realize when I'm being hit on and stuff like that. I miss all the signs and signals. But like, women don't have that problem. Like, it doesn't matter like what you're wearing. Like, guys are gonna like approach, especially single women, especially in a nightclub environment, stuff like that. And some guys don't know how to take rejection. I know, because I was one of those guys. I didn't know how to take rejection. I just thought it was, just me or something like that. But like, some guys do need to grow up, especially young men. They need to grow up and just realize, she disses you, she's not playing hard to get, leave it alone, go find somebody else essentially. But and kind of like swinging back to this topic though, it's just like, the reason why this is such a big deal is because it's 2024, and it still feels like in some states women have less rights essentially, and that's again, that's horrifying to think about.
It is, and I feel like there's a reignited effort in this country to actively try to stifle conversations about women's rights. I feel like we have worked our way back to the suffrage movement, to where not only were women trying to raise awareness about the fact that they wanted to have equal rights, but there was a concerted effort to silence that energy and put women back in their quote-unquote, back in their place. And I feel like we've seen like a revival of that a little bit in social settings whenever we're having conversations about women's rights and women's safety.
What are your thoughts about like all the podcasts, like the whatever podcast, Fresh and Fit and stuff like that? Like, what are your thoughts about those guys?
Oh, the ridiculousness of it. I'm glad to see that it's kind of fading out a little bit. I saw that Fresh and Fit were on H3 the other day, desperately clinging to relevance. I heard, I saw Pearl Davis pop up for the first time in forever on my feed a couple months ago. Like, she's, trying to cling her way back into relevance. I feel like it is starting to die out, but it is just the latest fad of misogyny, and something else will take its place. I actually just retweeted the Whatever podcast today. One of the clips that they put out, it was like, I have yet to see a single man say a single intelligent thing on this podcast. Like, it is every clip that I have ever seen of a man talking on this podcast, he is saying the most ridiculously stupid shit.
I actually sent them a message on Instagram. I was like, hey, Would you like to have a guy that has a different perspective? It's like, sorry, we're not taking any of the guys at this time. It's like, okay, that's fine. No big deal.
People have begged me. They're like, okay, go on, whatever. I was like, I would literally rather sit in the dark and stab needles through my eyes.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think it's kind of like watching a train wreck, essentially. Like, it's kind of like watching 90 Day Fiancé. It's a train wreck, but yet I just find myself still fascinated by some of the things that go on there, really. So
it's crazy, and it's funny because I tell people whenever they tell me that I should go on, I was like, they would never have someone like me on their podcast because what the heck are they going to do with me? I am a married, stay-at-home, homeschooling mom of 2 children. I am incredibly progressive in both my social and political leanings. Like, what are all of these? What is this terminally single host gonna say to me about my life choices and about my perspective on relationships that I actually have and he does not?
I thought he was married.
Is he? Is Brian married?
I can't remember. I thought he was.
I need to track down that woman and make sure that she's safe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Somebody do a wellness check on Brian's wife.
If he has one, yes. Yeah. But yeah, I talked about that a couple weeks ago with Sleeve T-Rocks, and we just talked about like how I feel like there's a lot of the red pill guys are listening to the wrong people. They're listening to the guys that are like telling them like, if that woman turns you down, she's automatically a whore, which I think is stupid. It's such a terrible way to look at things. And I just think that some guys, like I said, just like, if a woman turns you down, there's probably something you did wrong. You probably approached her the wrong way, or she just was not interested. She just wants to have fun with her friends. Don't take it personal. Move on. There's no point. If your friends egg you on, leave it alone. That's all you got to do. I can think of so many other men out there that are, men of value that aren't like these guys. Like, oh well, when they say things like, oh, these women over here, they're OnlyFans models, they have no value. Okay, first off, women do have value. You just don't value them yourself, kind of deal. If a woman does OnlyFans, that's fine. That's entirely her business. But a guy is going to see value in her someday. He's not going to see an OnlyFans model. He's going to see a woman, essentially. If there was better options out there for women, maybe they wouldn't have to, because what's her name? Jasmine Jaffer. She's a lawyer. She's making more money doing OnlyFans instead of being an attorney. I mean, she found a niche. But
cost of living is high as shit right now. You do what you got to do.
Exactly. So that's why I'm fully in support of women that go into sex work as long as they're not being coerced. That's when I have a problem with it, essentially. Anyway, I keep getting off track. I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. I'm fine with free flowing conversation.
Yeah, but anyway, do you think anything is going to come from this legislation? Do you think Mississippi's going to change it, or do you think they're going to stick with it for the time being? I
think that I would be really, really surprised if there was not an extensive effort by pro-abortion organizations, of human rights organizations to get this law turned over to see that this law is removed from the books immediately. I'm surprised that this hasn't been something that has actively affected women on a large enough scale to get. I mean, I'm thankful that it hasn't. But it's kind of surprising that it hasn't affected any women on a large enough scale to get attention to it up until this point.
Do you think if, okay, have you ever heard the term of if men could get pregnant, there would be everybody would be pro-choice? Do you think that's kind of true? If men, what was it? If men were not allowed to leave an abusive relationship, do you think legislation would be oh my God, we got to fix this right away?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If men were the ones that were getting pregnant, there would be an abortion turnstop at every corner. They would make a game out of it. You could play video games while you get your abortion. They would make it as non-invasive as possible. It would be the most painless procedure possible if men were the ones that were experiencing it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I agree. My wife feels the same way too, so So we pretty much covered all the topics. Is there anything else you want to cover, or are you comfortable with closing up shop?
I'm good for closing up for now. We've been going for almost 2 hours.
Yep.
A good show.
Absolutely. Yep. Kay, once again, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to give a closing thoughts on any of the topics we talked about, or do you just want to give yourself one more shout out before we go?
Yeah, you can follow me on pretty much every social media platform of just my name. It's Kay Fellowz. I just spell it with a Z on social media, so KayFellowz. You could follow my organization. I run a human rights organization called Protecting Life Through Ethical Accountability. You can find a link to that in all of my social media bios. That's about it.
All right, fantastic. Once again, thank you so much. I really enjoy conversations like this because I feel like they are good conversations to have. Like not everything has to be, blood sports. It could just be good dialogue, essentially. So, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
I prefer this.
I hope you have enjoyed yourself, though.
I have. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, fantastic. Well, I hope you have a great night, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Everybody, be sure to tune me in next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See y'all next week. Take care.